Hello, and welcome to Enlightened Empaths, your community for the spiritually awakened. We have a wonderful guest that we'd like to introduce today, Suzanne Falter. She's after losing her daughter Teal in 2012, Suzanne Falter discovered the healing power of self-care. She now hosts the Self-Care for Extremely Busy Women podcast, blogs extensively, and is the author of multiple self-help titles, including the Extremely Busy Woman's Guide to Self-Care, which can be found in source books. Her essays have appeared in Self, More, Fitness, New Woman, and the New York Times, as well as O Magazine. Thank you so much for joining us today, Suzanne.
My pleasure. My pleasure.
And we would love if you could give us a little backstory, because I think a lot of people know you as the guru for self-care for busy people. You have a strong corporate background. You have all of these things, but you're really a beautiful, beautiful story starts with your daughter, Teal.
Yes, it does. And thank you for saying so, because without Teal and her life and her death, I would not have learned many, many, many powerful lessons over the last 9 years since her death. 9 years and just coming up any day now, as a matter of fact. Basically, I was a driven workaholic. I was, one of those terrible internet marketing people that annoys people with emails and stuff like that, 10, 12 years ago. And my daughter was the opposite. She was a free-spirited soul who traveled around the world with her little travel guitar in her backpack and just wanted peace, love, and understanding for everyone. She had epilepsy, and what happened was that she came to live in San Francisco where I was, and we went out to dinner one night. And 2 hours later, I got a call that she was in the emergency room having had a massive cardiac arrest, and she was in a coma, from which she never emerged, nor was there ever a cause found for her cardiac arrest. And because she had suffered extensive brain damage, we had to take her off of life support 6 days later. And in that time, I began to connect energetically with Teal. She was a big energy and a big spirit and a big soul. Because she was joyful and she wanted to be a healer. Her training was actually in singing the blues, believe it or not, because she'd gone to a music conservatory for that. And when she got out, she went down to Austin, Texas and started singing the blues. And then one day she called up and she said, "I think I'm actually supposed to be a healer." Okay, I said. I wasn't taking anything she said too terribly seriously, mostly because I was so very self-involved. But she went off to, begin to pursue esoteric interests. And the day after her collapse, she was going to begin taking classes in San Francisco on what she thought would be healing. So as it turned out, she has become a healer in the afterlife. And I was the very first person to really benefit from that, because during that week of her coma, I began to really connect with her energetically. I woke up in the hotel room near the hospital one night, and there she was in my whispering in my ear, and I could feel her around me. And I was like, "Wow, is that you?" And she's like, "That's me." Unflapped, unfazed. This is just like, "Mom, this is where I'm at now." So we went through the transition of her death, and during that time, I had some super powerful experiences sitting by her dying body, where I felt myself drawn into this beautiful web of humanity that left me just sort of dazzled and struck and so blown away by the beauty of this transition she was going through. I could really feel it. And as I left her bedside to take a break and I walked around the hospital, I began to look at the people around me, and I could feel everything about them. I could see what was on their minds. I could see who was having a struggle and who was happy and who was preoccupied. I mean, I could really see what was going on around them. I could read their energy. And I ended up having this incredible conversation with a homeless man who, this was a San Francisco General Hospital, which serves everybody. And here he was, and he heard me telling a friend of hers over the phone that she was dying. And he came up to me and we just had this incredible connection talking about daughters and how you really had to spend time with your daughter. And I mean, there were so many things that happened that week. Yet the strange thing was that this was what it was like when she was born. And the day she was born, I started reading all the auras of all the people who came into the room, the hospital room. And I had had a rough delivery. I'd had a cesarean, and I wasn't really even with her the first several hours. But I could see that the night nurse, had a big fight with her partner, and I could see like the stressed out med student, and I could read everybody's pain. And this lasted for about 24 hours. So there was something about Teal that was energetically sensitive, perhaps. But then it just kept on going, because as the weeks wore on after her death, I began to have incredible dreams where she would visit me and we would have elaborate conversations, or I just felt her energy moving through my body, and even occasionally laughing with this weird sort of disembodied laughter that would move through me, which all sounds pretty crazy when you think about it, but maybe not. So I don't know how much more of this story you want me to get into, but that's the start, at least.
No, that's beautiful. Thank you for sharing all of that. Do you think that it's almost as though when you were connected with her as she took her first breath and her last, that you were channeling her healing energy?
It could be. I was definitely channeling something, and I have felt many, many, many times that I was channeling her energy and the larger divine energy at times. All I know is that she really was put here to be a healer. And a number of people after her death, mostly young women who were her age, she died at 22, they got in touch with me and said, I had an incredible dream last night, and I reached out my hand in this forest, and I was feeling so confused about my career, and suddenly there she was, and she was taking my hand, and she was comforting me, and one of them said, I asked her, how is it up there? And she said, really, really great, which is kind of a casual way to talk about the afterlife, I think. But, if you're 22, that's what you say. And she was just, kind of jibing with these friends, and they were feeling her energy. And that particular woman said she woke up from that dream and really knew what it was she was supposed to do with her career. All of her confusion was gone. Another had a panic attack lifted from her. And, sometimes these are specific healing gifts that people were being given. Other times, I think, for me, I was writing. I have been a writer for 40 years. And, I'd kind of drifted away from the really good stuff in my career up to the point where she passed away. And immediately I went back to writing these very intimate, very personal blog posts. And her energy was just seeping through them. And many, many people were contacting me and saying, oh my God, this is so raw. It's so tender. It's, it's so moving. And really what it was I was kind of in partnership with her. It was as if she had her arm around me and we were kind of discussing and writing the blog together, if that makes sense.
It makes perfect sense. Sorry, Samantha, go ahead.
No, I just said that's beautiful.
Thank you.
It is. Would you be comfortable sharing the story of the letter that Teal had written you?
Okay, so among other things, there was, I'll have to share the story of dancing in the car, because that's a big piece of this. Along the way, I let go of my work, I was very disconnected from my work. It was not the right work, and I knew it, and I never did it again after her death. But I was without work really for 2 years and living very, very frugally on what I had of savings. And during that time, I tried a few times to restart my business because I thought you can't just keep living on your savings. You've got to go out and earn money. You've got to do this. Come on, get with the program here. And I was pushing myself in a not very kind way, given what I'd been through. I just kind of pushed myself, and I started an online program, and I sold a bunch of people into it. And, I tried to do it. And then the next day, the web browser, or the interface for the course totally crashed and burned. And the site ended up being hacked into 5 different times. So after several days, everybody who'd signed up had refunded, and the whole thing collapsed. And I was left with no trace of a career at that point. So I was sitting in my office, and I was depressed, and I was upset, and I didn't know what to do. And I was like, oh my God, what am I going to do? And I heard her whisper in my ear, clean out your inbox. So I cleaned out my inbox. Now, my inbox was this 8-inch high pile of papers that I had not been through in several years. I just kept throwing stuff on it. And I spent the entire afternoon taking everything out of that inbox. And at the very bottom was a single piece of paper. And by then I was like, I don't understand what this exercise was about. But I turned over the piece of paper, and it was, in fact, a letter from Teal. She had written this to me the previous Christmas, and I had completely forgotten about it. And in the letter, she said, I wanted to write you this letter to tell you about how I sat down with a healer who told me that my purpose in this lifetime with you was that we were meant to be leaders in light together, and that I was meant to help you in whatever way I could. So I'm just saying, Mom, let's be leaders in light together. And I was stunned. That's a pretty direct response to the question, what am I supposed to do with my life? It wasn't clear what being a leader in light was at that moment. But in fact, it all began to kind of tumble and evolve and grow and manifest. And over time, I'd say, within about 5 more years, I had built a platform around self-care, and I had been talking in my blog posts about self-care. By now, I had attracted employment writing fiction, which is something I do as well as the nonfiction. And I was writing these novels, and I was spending a lot of time writing about self-care. And lo and behold, got a book deal to do a book about self-care. So I did the book about self-care. And then, most incredibly, about a year ago, I had a little Facebook group. It was nothing, huge, a couple thousand people, whatever. Well, one day I looked at my Facebook group, and there were 2,500 people requesting to come in. And I thought, that's odd. I assumed something was broken. It was the same person 2,500 times, or who knew what, but it wasn't. It was 2,500 extremely busy women who wanted to come in. And the next day there was 3,700. And the day after that, there was 5,000. And it kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And pretty soon, within about 6 weeks, there were 55,000 women in this Facebook group. And they were all looking for self-care, yes, but more importantly, they wanted to talk about the problems in their lives, and they're still in there talking about the problems in their lives. And they're talking about becoming whole. How do I set boundaries with my demanding spouse? What do I do about this job where I'm being sexually harassed and I'm afraid to speak up? How can I set a limit with my friend who's just being too demanding? What can I say no to give me more time to take care of me? These kinds of big questions. And lo and behold, at any given moment, there are 20,000 women in this group, and they show up as supportive friends to each other. It is stunning to me, the level of kindness and help and healing that's in this group. So now what I understand is this is one of the ways that Teal and I are leaders in love and light together, because I just hold space for this group. A lot of people don't even know I'm the administrator of this group. And I have my good buddy, Tamala Gordon, who's down in Florida, who found me through this Facebook group. And she has become an incredible partner. And I have this wonderful team of moderators who help me make sure nobody's trying to self-promote, and we just keep it a really clean and healthy and excellent environment. And it's just incredible. I mean, this is the healing platform that Teal wanted. And here it is. And it just came out of nowhere. I did nothing to cause that spike in my group.
That's like a miracle.
No kidding. Isn't it?
It
Isn't it
is.
crazy?
All the things that had to come together. I mean, you had to be open to, first of all, connecting with your daughter. You had to follow through on the suggestions she gave you and read the letter. I mean, all those, it's like you were just dancing this dance with her the whole time. And now you two are leaders in light. That's beautiful.
Thank you. And, you're reminding me, as you say this, to mention that I did get woken up. I've often been woken up in the morning with instructions on how to do this work. And one morning in 2018, I was woken up with the instructions to start a Facebook group around self-care. So that's how I started that group. And at the time I was putting the book together. So I just gave it the same name as the book. And then one day I got this big kind of channeled rush of stuff, and I grabbed an envelope and I scrawled it all over it. And there were maybe 500 people in the group at the time. Now, when I look at that, I understand that that was some of the key instruction that I was meant to follow around developing this group. And bringing in Tamala, she is an expert in inclusivity and self-care for Black and brown women and all kinds of people. She's really a voice for all the people in self-care who get ignored, and I brought her in because I wanted this to be a whole and complete and excellent space where everybody can support everybody, and everybody can be seen and heard no matter what your size is or your sexual orientation or your gender, or we are not open to men per se, but we're open to non-men, and we do that to create a safe space for women to just let it all hang out and do what they got to do. So there you have it.
See, and I think holding space is so important right now. And you and I have talked a few times, and just the fact that this is such a collaborative effort with your daughter, without a doubt. I mean, you two are in this together, and when you just all of the synchronicities, all of the growth, all of the evolution, would you feel comfortable talking about your the woman who was able to keep going because she got Teal's heart?
Oh yeah, that's an interesting story. So when Teal died, her death was a very gentle one, in that basically her heart just stopped. I mean, it damaged her brain severely, but everything else in her body was okay. She hadn't been through a car accident or cancer or many of the things that would kill a younger person like her. So we were asked if we would consider donating her organs and tissues, and we said sure. And, really we thought, okay, that's how Teal's going to be a healer, and that'll be that. What's pretty incredible is her organs were donated to 4 different people, including a young woman her age who got her heart and her kidney, one of her kidneys. And Amara, as is her name, is in fact today employed in a hospital where she helps people receive EKGs and heart diagnostics, which is pretty cool in and of itself. So there's a healing link. And more relevantly to me, I have gotten to know her mother really well, Debbie. Now, Debbie is a force to be reckoned with. She's just this incredibly powerful, positive, energized, energetic woman who really knows how to go through all kinds of shenanigans and come out the other side. She was a single mother and raised her kids and went through 8 years of congestive heart failure with her daughter, who almost died 3 different times. And then Teal's heart saved her life. The story I really love to tell about this, and that Debbie tells from the stage when we speak about this experience of organ donation and our connection to each other, is that she stayed awake for something like 24 hours waiting to find out if her daughter survived the surgery, because it was very complicated and extensive. And when she finally got to go in the OR after the first phase of the surgery, which was the heart transplant, Amara was unconscious. She was being stabilized to go through the rest of the surgery involving the kidney. And Debbie walked into the recovery room and saw this beautiful, sparkling golden glow all around her daughter. And she said, "Oh, she's glowing." And the nurse said, "Oh, well, she has color in her cheeks because suddenly she has much better circulation because her new heart is working so well." And Debbie said, no, that's not what I mean. She is glowing. I mean, she described this as the light from a pair of bright headlights. I mean, really glowing, like a glow that encased her body about 6 to 8 inches above her body. Her sister walked in at that moment and looked at her and said, "Hey, she's glowing." So it was like two of them saw this. And I just have to believe that is that energetic glow that I saw when Teal was born, that I saw when I was letting go of her and I walked through the hospital and I saw all those auras. This stuff is real. This is real. She was able to bring that beautiful glowing energy with her heart into Amara's body. And that's just extraordinary. I mean, there's just nothing like that, right?
I agree. That is beyond extraordinary. And it's just a testimony to Teal's amazing energy and her purpose.
Mm-hmm.
Has she been able to connect with her dad in these amazing ways?
Well, just before we took her off life support, she had her own way of saying goodbye. And I felt it in that experience I described with the energy moving through me. Her dad had a dream where he saw her come to him, and she was wearing a very simple gray sweatshirt and jeans and a pair of sneakers, and she looked radiantly happy. And she just smiled at him, and he felt her joy. And that was the whole dream. Wow. And he felt that she was just coming to say goodbye in a very direct way of just suffusing him with this ethereal joy, this beautiful, shining love. And that was one of the real hallmarks around her death, was the extraordinary and inexplicably beautiful joy we were feeling, along with the shock and the grief and the horror of losing our daughter. It was the most incredible mixed bag of emotions I've ever been through.
Oh my gosh, you explain it so beautifully. And I'm just so glad, because often it's really hard for loved ones to get through to us that way because our grief puts up a barrier. So this is just such a wonderful demonstration of just pure love.
I think so. I mean, that's really what I took away from it, because I was not living in a space of pure love before her death. Her death dramatically changed my life. It put me back on the path to myself, for one thing. And in the hospital, I made myself a promise, which was that I was going to become a better person. If she had to die, I was going to stop the baloney and get on with a life of meaning, and stop doing work that was just for the money, and stop doing work that wasn't in alignment with my values, that I was going to stop and live simply and humbly and frugally, just like Teal did. And, a number of times I had these dreams along the way in those first 2 years. I had one in particular after the business really crashed and burned, and I got the letter about being leaders in love and light. I woke up one morning, maybe a month and a half later, and I had this waking vision. It wasn't quite a dream, but it wasn't quite a apparition in front of me. It was just sort of this awareness. And it was of the bathroom door in the house I lived in. And there was brilliant light seeping out around the edges of the closed door. And as I stood there looking at it, I said, "Are you in there?" And I heard Teal say, "Yes." And I said, "Why won't you let me see you?" And she said, "Because I don't want you to get distracted." I said, "Okay, do you have a message for me?" She said, "Yes. You are whole and complete and ready to go back to work." And the significance of the bathroom was that when she collapsed and had the cardiac arrest, she was in a locked bathroom in her own apartment that she was living in. And she had the brain damage she had because the guy who she lived with was trying to get the door unlocked. She had locked the door and just collapsed as if she knew she really needed to die, you know? So here she was glowing and telling me to go back to work. And shortly after that, the investor who hires me to pay fiction, to write fiction, showed up and said, "Hey, would you like to write novels?" That was completely out of the blue. I mean, I had published a novel with Random House maybe 15 years earlier, but it had been a while. These novels are a way of communicating, these bigger messages about love and understanding. And I've written 8 of them, actually, about the queer community. One of them, 3 of them are about a trans man spy and all the interesting people around him. And the other 5 are about a very tightly knit lesbian community here in Oakland. And it's really modeled on a group of women I'm friendly with because I, too, am a lesbian in Oakland. So those books have been real opportunities for love and understanding. And the last one, which is called Undivided, is a book with an organ donation theme in it. And I was able to take a story of another person I'd met who had an incredible organ donation story and extract it and fit it into these stories about this tight-knit community of women. There's a lot of love and understanding in there. So everything I'm doing now is just around this message of wholeness, of oneness, of what Teal used to call the unified field of love. And in the unified field of love, we are all one. We are very much knit together in an inextricable pattern of dependencies and interdependencies and ways of supporting each other and ways of holding each other firm so the fabric doesn't tear. And when we forget that, we get a world full of rips and tears and holes and destruction. And I really feel, I've been working on a memoir about this huge experience of Teal's healing and becoming the healing partner with her. I've been working on that book for about 7 or 8 years. And various bumps along the road have pushed it this way and that. And really now what I'm doing is I'm telling the whole story, the whole unvarnished story, including when I first began to receive her energy, which was while I was driving. And that is just the craziest thing because you don't really think you should be channeling while you're driving, like keep those eyes open, right? But the crazy thing was, this was how I could relax into an alpha state. I could really, really receive her energy powerfully. And I was just driving the country roads of, the North Bay, north of the Bay Area here. And I was living up there at the time in a friend's guest room and just driving around and feeling her energy. And particularly when I put on disco. So I was like, what's with the disco? Really? You're a blues singer. Really, disco? And the message I got was that I relaxed and resonated and kind of opened up when I listened to disco because, I'm in my 60s. That was my youth. And that music just opened me up to be able to really receive Teal. And that's when her laughter started to really ripple through me in this place of receiving. And I often would turn on an iPod that I was playing through the sound system in the car. And I'd be driving along and I'd just turn it on and there she'd be singing to me. There were so many moments like that. I don't know. I think she's still with me. That was some years ago, but just recently I was going to take a walk. This was last winter. I was going to take a walk at Ocean Beach, which is where we scattered her ashes with a good buddy of mine. They have turned the highway up there into this is in San Francisco. They've turned the highway into a walking road for the pedestrians during the pandemic. So my friend Robert and I were going to meet there. Another friend of mine, Bonnie, calls me up about an hour before I'm going to leave. And she says, well, I was just meditating and I think I got a message from Teal. I said, really? How do you know? She said, well, I've never met Teal, but I asked, hey, who is this? And the message was, it's Teal. And how many Teals are there? So she said, yes, what's the message? And what she saw was a really turbulent, wild, wavy ocean. So in fact, that week there were a lot of high surf warnings in the Pacific along that stretch of the California coast, and several people have been swept out to sea. And the message was Suzanne has to be extremely careful. So I called Robert and we decided to walk in Golden Gate Park. And as it turned out, the day before, Robert had been walking there, heard the alarms go off, and saw someone get pulled from the surf. So that's pretty wild. I mean, very specific. Bonnie certainly had no idea what I was off to do that day. So
That's amazing.
Isn't it great?
It really, all of your stories are just life affirming and transforming.
Well, thank you very much.
How do you take care of yourself with self-help during the grief process?
Well, look, self-help during the grief process is about letting yourself really understand that you have every right to grieve as much as you want. And we live in a culture that pushes us to do things which we are not prepared to do most of the time. We have to get up early and we have to go to bed late and we got to work. And, there are often women in my Facebook group saying, my boss wants me to work on the weekends. That's not okay, is it? The expectation is we'll grieve for 3 or 4 days and then we'll get right back to it. And I had to really give myself vast amounts of permission to drive and cry and have boxes of tissue wherever I went, to do just what I wanted to do and to not work. And believe me, I tried to work. Those first few months I tried to work until finally a good friend of mine said, you just have to stop. This is not going well. Just stop. And I said, okay, I'll stop for 2 months. And that seemed like a very long amount of time. Like, how could I possibly give myself 2 months off? But I did. And do you know, I didn't really work again for 2 years. Every time I tried, it failed miserably. So I was just like, okay, I'll stop. And then I suddenly had space to feel my feelings. And that is, of course, the work of grief. You have to feel your feelings. You have to be willing to cry, write letters to the dead if you need to, visit important places, make a little altar. I made my car into a moving altar, and I put a license plate on it that said Tealster. It happens to be a little teal colored car. And I put a picture of her on the glove box, and I had a little Kuan Yin statue on the dashboard because Kuan Yin was, her favorite goddess. She followed all these goddesses with rapt attention, and Kuan Yin was her favorite, the goddess of compassion. And I had various little touches like that, and drove around and talked to Teal and channeled and listened to music, and that's how I got through it.
I think another important thing is that you're not airy-fairy woo-woo. And I love that about you.
I know. As I say all this, I'm like, boy, it would be really easy to dismiss everything I'm saying as just a big, huge crock. But no, I don't think I am. But when you're changed by something, you're changed by something. And I'm a lot more open to really the reality of our connection to the afterlife than I ever have been. I mean, it's easy to just have that spiritual bypass thing going on, like, oh, okay, it's fine. Let's all surrender. But really, we have to function out in the world, and we have to put one foot in front of the other, and we have to stay grounded. And you can stay grounded and maintain a connection to the afterlife. That's what I believe, at least.
Oh, I agree 100%. And also the fact that the true thread through all of this that you're sharing with us is love with your group, with your daughter, Samantha and I have talked about this a lot. I talk to this about a lot of folks that I do readings with, that's truly the key. That's the key to the healing that's trying to happen right now. It's everything.
And will happen.
Yes.
The healing will happen because we will be pushed to a place in our world where the only alternative is love, that we will run out of other options. there will be just enough death and destruction and chaos that we'll finally realize how much we need each other, and that unified field of love is in fact real.
So beautiful.
We really don't have a choice, because we are living through one of the most important times in our planet's history. It's the time when we will decide if this little fragile ball of people is going to keep going or not. That's the truth of it.
That is so true. What do you think is the biggest obstacle in people trying to practice self-care? Is it permission? Like, I feel like you needed permission in a way.
Oh, I totally needed it. And I didn't have it at first. And then finally, the chaos was so bad and the collapse of my life was so complete that I just had to take it. I think people need permission. They also need to recognize and resolve their guilt. So one of the big themes I see among these women in my group and those who've read my book and so forth that I hear from is people say, I just feel so guilty taking time away from my kids. Well, it's the oxygen mask all the way, because if you don't take the time for yourself, you end up being the shrew mother and the bitch wife. You just do. And if you don't take time for yourself, you don't get to enjoy the process. And if you don't enjoy the process, you're a less effective, wife, mother, employee person. You're just not grounded in the good stuff. You're off kind of wandering around the edges in a needy, distracted, and potentially grasping way. But the fact is that when we allow ourselves to take an afternoon off, to take a week off, to take an evening out with our good girlfriends, or to take a little class of something that would really inspire us, or to run that Ironman, or whatever it is that would really feed our soul, we get the opportunity to ask for help. And I think that's the other big misconception, is that self-care is this terribly private, internal thing that you just do by yourself and nobody really has to know. But what I learned in my period of healing was that I have to ask for help, and I got a lot of help. And I started to love asking for help. I joined several support groups. I found that I had some addictive behaviors that really needed to be reined in. I found a group of grieving parents that I could talk to about my grief over losing my daughter. And this was not quick. I didn't join that group till she'd been dead for 2 years. And I remember the facilitator saying, well, why is it that you're joining the group now? And I said, because I didn't know how to ask for help with this till now. I was the ultimate steely, independent, I will get this done, stand back, I've got this kind of person. And of course, Teal knew that about me. She was happy to ask for help for herself. She had a medical condition that required she get help sometimes.
I don't think society applauds people who ask for help. We promote that independent spirit, which is so counterintuitive.
Of course, we promote competition as well. And competition does not allow for co-opetition, which is people who are in the same field of helping each other. Why on earth would we help each other when the current ethos or the former ethos is that we have to crush each other? But when you help each other, it's very much like these communities of scientists who came together and developed the vaccine for the pandemic. People can help each other to resolve the bigger problems. And that's actually another theme that I think is really emerging in this time, is the incredible importance of being able to step out and say, I need help, and somebody else to step out and say, I have empathy for your situation and I'd love to help. It costs us little or nothing sometimes to do that. I'm always in my book, I really caution these extremely busy women from volunteering to help everybody else at their own expense, and they have no time for themselves. So of course you got to do that in balance, people. But it's really tapping into the unified field of love, this shared universal experience of power, of shared love and shared compassion and shared creativity and shared original thinking and shared resources. We can really accomplish so much that way.
It's the only way we're going to get on the other side of this. I agree with you 100%.
Mhm.
So what do you and Teal have planned next?
Well, we're well into the final draft of the memoir, which I am actively asking the universe to send me a podcast producer for, because I'd like to do the memoir as a serial podcast. And
Ooh.
I have a really fun podcast right now called Self-Care for Extremely Busy Women that has really grown very, very steadily and happily during its 145 episodes. And, I realized I love doing spoken word material. And I really think a serial podcast about this incredible Teal's, even Teal's receiving her own healing gift is in there, because she had a really pivotal experience in Morocco about a year before she died, where she had a pre-seizure aura that lasted for 24 hours. And during that time, she felt that she had been visited by healing snakes that wrapped around her body and gave her the gift of healing. And there was a witness to this, a young man who grew up with her, who's one of her best friends. And he and I have talked about it extensively. And, it's just so cool that these things are out there and that these little pieces of Teal's history are there. And that's just part of the story. There's a lot to it.
I think that would make such a fascinating serial podcast because, first of all, you can tell you're a writer. You speak so beautifully and straight from the heart, and yet it comes out eloquently and perfectly. So I think that would be really nice for people. But also, I feel like the stories you have to tell are so profound that it's almost best given in small bites rather than reading it in one sitting. So I'll join your prayer request that you find a great person for that. 'Cause that's what we need. We need more of this hope and positivity out there. Can you tell people like how to find you and connect with you?
Sure. I'm on, my website is Suzanne Falter, SUZANNE, like Frank, ALTER.com, SuzanneFalter.com. The Facebook group is Self-Care for Extremely Busy Women, and I can be found on Facebook as well. And, the books at Amazon and all places where books are sold, Self-Care for Extremely Busy Women. And if anybody is inspired or if anybody wants to, join me on this crazy journey I'm on, just be in touch. And we've got all kinds of nice ways to share this work together.
Thank you so very much for sharing your story, for sharing your beautiful daughter with us. It's truly, inspiration doesn't cover it because no, when I feel Teal's energy, when I talk with you, it's a very unique feeling. And as a medium, that's kind of hard to put into words, but there's a purity and a depth and a love that comes through with your daughter that it brings tears to my eyes every time. And I think that's what we're all trying to bring into the world right now, is that truth and love.
Wow. Well, thank you for really getting it. And you, of course, are an amazing reader, and I have benefited from some of your readings as well. And anybody who's listening to this who hasn't had that opportunity, go to the Grateful Messenger and do that for yourself, because that is a profound act of self-care right there.
Oh, amen. I second that. This is the best.
Oh, and so great to connect with you too, Samantha.
Oh, I've thoroughly enjoyed it. And I know that your messages and your stories are going to help and comfort so many people. I really hope you guys check out her Facebook page and her website. You've got a great website, super easy to navigate and filled with great information.
Thank you.
We'll post all of that in the show notes and on our Facebook page. Thank you again so much, Suzanne. I really have just felt uplifted. I needed this today. It was lovely talking to you.
Great. I'm so glad to hear it.
And thank you, everyone, for listening. Please remember, as always, to show up, do great work, and share your light.
Amen.
Take care.